The pediatric ward of Mercy General Hospital in New Orleans never truly slept. At 3 in the morning, Emily Grace Carter stood by the nurse's station, her practical shoes silent against the gleaming floor as she updated patient charts. The gentle hum of medical equipment provided a familiar soundtrack to her night shift, punctuated by occasional beeps and distant footsteps. Her watch showed 3:17 a.m. when her phone vibrated. Mom again. Third time tonight. Emily's thumb hovered over the screen, a habit she'd developed in moments of anxiety. The message was predictable. "Honey, where did you put my evening pills?" Same question, different hour. Emily had labeled the pill organizer with giant letters, "Evening" in red marker. She'd even stuck a post-it note on the bathroom mirror. Still, her mother's deteriorating memory meant these midnight messages were becoming more frequent. "Second shelf, bathroom cabinet, red container," she typed back, adding a heart emoji because guilt always followed frustration. Her mother hadn't always been this way. Before the illness, she'd been the one taking care of everyone else. The pediatric ward's fluorescent lights cast shallow shadows across her face as she tucked a loose strand of light brown hair back into her practical bun. Her scrubs were a soft blue that matched the ward's color scheme, chosen to be soothing for the young patients. Everything in pediatrics was designed around comfort, even if the reality of sick children could never truly be comfortable. "Nurse Carter?" A soft voice called from behind her. It was Regina, one of the night shift assistants. "Room 204 is asking for you. Charlotte's fever is making her restless again." Emily nodded, already reaching for her stethoscope. Charlotte was 6, fighting pneumonia with the kind of determination only kids seem to possess. She'd been admitted 3 days ago and already had the entire staff wrapped around her little finger. "I'll be right there," Emily replied, her voice carrying that gentle authority she'd perfected over years of pediatric nursing. "Could you check on Tommy in 210? His IV was looking a bit low earlier." The walk to Charlotte's room gave Emily a moment to center herself. These quiet hours between midnight and dawn were often the hardest for the children, when pain felt sharper and home seemed furthest away. She'd learned early in her career that sometimes what a child needed most wasn't medicine but presence. Charlotte's room was dimly lit by a unicorn nightlight, casting rainbow patterns on the walls. The little girl was curled up in her bed, dark curls damp with sweat against her forehead. "Hey, sweetheart." Emily kept her voice low, soothing. "I heard someone's having trouble sleeping." Charlotte's eyes, bright with fever, found Emily's face. "The dragons won't stop flying around," she mumbled, her imagination clearly influenced by the fever. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, her hand gentle as she checked Charlotte's temperature. "Well, you know what? Dragons only fly around brave knights, so I think they're just checking to make sure you're as brave as they heard you were." This earned her a small smile. Emily went through the familiar motions of checking vitals while weaving a story about friendly dragons who protected sleeping children. By the time she administered the fever reducer, Charlotte was already drifting off. Back at the nurse's station, Emily pulled out her worn notebook, a habit she'd maintained since her first day of nursing. Inside were the words of her patients, little moments of wisdom or innocence that helped her remember why she chose this path. Under today's date, she wrote, "Dragons know brave knights when they see them. Charlotte, age 6. The emergency alert came at 4:23 a.m. The sound cut through the ward's relative quiet like a blade, and Emily was moving before the announcement. Finished. Code Blue Emergency Department Pediatric Trauma incoming. Her shoes squeaked against the floor as she ran toward the ED. In these moments, everything else fell away. Her mother's messages, her exhaustion, the weight of constant caring. There was only the next patient, the next need, the next chance to make a difference. She arrived just as the ambulance doors burst open. The paramedics rushed in with a small figure on the stretcher, calling out stats that made Emily's heart race. Male, 5 years old, severe trauma, critical blood loss. Through the organized chaos of the trauma team's response, Emily caught glimpses of the boy. Blonde hair now matted with blood. A small hand with dirt under the fingernails. A dinosaur t-shirt torn and stained. He looked so small on the adult-sized stretcher, so vulnerable. "Blood type AB negative," one of the paramedics announced, and Emily's head snapped up. She knew immediately what that meant. It was one of the rarest blood types, and their blood bank was perpetually short on rare types. Dr. Martinez, the attending physician, cursed under his breath. "Check the blood bank. We need units now." Emily didn't hesitate. "I'm AB negative," she said, already rolling up her sleeve. "I can donate." The next few minutes were a blur of action. As they prepped her for the emergency donation, Emily kept her eyes on the little boy. His face was so pale, too pale, but she could see he was fighting. There was a stuffed T-Rex clutched in the crook of his arm, somehow still there despite everything. As the needle slid into her arm, Emily heard one of the nurses say his name. Ethan Miller. She watched her blood flow through the tube, willing it to be enough, to be in time. In that moment, she didn't know she was about to become irreversibly connected to this child's life. She didn't know about his father, waiting desperately in the family room, or how this night would change everything. She only knew that somewhere, a mother was probably praying for her son. And Emily, who had spent her life taking care of others, did what came naturally. She prayed too, her thumb worrying the edge of her other fingers, her green eyes fixed on the smallest patient she'd ever helped save. The monitor's steady beeping was the only sound in the room as dawn began to break over New Orleans, promising a new day, and though she didn't know it yet, a completely new life. Daniel Everett Miller hadn't slept in 36 hours. The pristine waiting room of Mercy General Hospital felt like a prison cell, despite its attempts at comfort. His custom-tailored suit, usually a symbol of control and power, was wrinkled from hours of anxious waiting. The coffee in his hand, his 8th, or maybe 10th, had gone cold hours ago. His son was alive. The doctors had told him that much. But the words critical condition and next 24 hours kept echoing in his mind, mixing with the memory of screeching tires and shattering glass. The car that had run the red light had missed his vehicle by inches, but had sent their driver swerving directly into Ethan's side of the SUV. Their driver, Miguel, who'd worked for him for 5 years, was still in surgery. "Mr. Miller?" A nurse approached, her practical shoes making no sound on the polished floor. "Dr. Martinez would like to speak with you about your son's condition." Daniel stood immediately, his 6'2" frame towering over most of the hospital staff. Dr. Martinez waited in his office, a space that somehow managed to be both clinical and compassionate. The doctor's expression was cautiously optimistic, which made Daniel's heart rate slow for the first time since the accident. "Ethan is stable," Dr. Martinez began, and Daniel felt his legs weaken slightly. He sat down, trying to maintain his composure. "The blood transfusion was successful and he's responding well to treatment. I need to emphasize how fortunate we were in this situation. Your son's blood type is extremely rare, and our blood bank was critically low on AB negative units. How did you find enough blood?" Daniel's voice was hoarse from hours of silence. "One of our nurses was a match. She donated immediately when she learned of the emergency." Dr. Martinez smiled slightly. Nurse Carter didn't hesitate for a second. "She's actually been monitoring Ethan's recovery personally, even though she's not assigned to his case." Something shifted in Daniel's chest. In his world of corporate takeovers and billion-dollar decisions, genuine altruism was rare. "I'd like to meet her," he said. "To thank her properly." Dr. Martinez nodded. "She's actually on duty now. I'll have someone fetch her." While they waited, Daniel's mind drifted to the last 3 years. After losing Rebecca to cancer, he'd thrown himself into work, building his tech empire larger than ever. But Ethan was all he had left of real value. The thought of losing him had shattered every wall Daniel had built around his emotions. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. The woman who entered wasn't what he expected. In his experience, people who did extraordinary things usually carried themselves with an air of importance. But Nurse Carter seemed to almost minimize her presence despite a natural grace in her movements. You wanted to see me, Dr. Martinez? Her voice was soft but clear, carrying a quiet confidence that caught Daniel's attention. Her green eyes moved from the doctor to him, and something flickered across her face. Recognition, perhaps, though not the kind he was used to seeing. She didn't look at him like the CEO of Miller Technologies. She looked at him like a father, whose child she'd helped save. Nurse Carter, this is Mr. Miller, Ethan's father. He wanted to thank you personally for your donation. Daniel stood, extending his hand. Miss Carter, I can't begin to express my gratitude. Their hands met, and he noticed how steady her grip was despite her delicate appearance. Whatever compensation you'd consider appropriate. No. The word was gentle but firm, cutting through his practiced speech about appreciation and rewards. I don't want compensation, Mr. Miller. I did what anyone would do. But not anyone could do it, he pressed. AB negative is rare. You saved my son's life. Please let me. Your son, she interrupted again, still gentle but unwavering, is a wonderful little boy who spent 20 minutes this morning telling me all about why T-Rex was the greatest dinosaur ever. That's all the reward I need. Daniel fell silent, studying her more carefully. Her scrubs were standard hospital issue, her light brown hair pulled back in a practical bun. She wore no jewelry except a simple watch, and no makeup covered the slight shadows under her eyes that spoke of long hours and dedicated care. Everything about her was genuine, from her posture to her rejection of his offer. You've been checking on him? Daniel asked, his voice softer now. A small smile touched her lips. He reminds me of my patients in pediatrics. Children have an amazing capacity for healing when they feel safe and cared for. She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. He mentioned his mother a few times. I've been making sure he doesn't feel alone when he wakes up confused. The mention of Rebecca should have hurt more, but something in Nurse Carter's tone, compassionate without being pitying, made it bearable. Thank you, he said, and for the first time in years the words felt inadequate. I should get back to my rounds, she said, glancing at her watch. But Mr. Miller, Ethan is doing, well, he's strong, and he has a father who clearly loves him very much. Those are powerful medicines. As she turned to leave, Daniel found himself speaking without planning his words, something he hadn't done since becoming CEO. Have dinner with me. She stopped, turning back with surprise evident on her face. I'm sorry? Not as compensation, he clarified quickly. Just dinner. To thank you properly. As a father, not a CEO. Emily Carter studied him for a long moment, and Daniel had the distinct feeling he was being evaluated on criteria that had nothing to do with wealth or status. Finally, she spoke. I don't think that would be appropriate, Mr. Miller, but thank you for the offer. She left before he could respond, her departure as quiet as her entrance had been. Daniel stood there, feeling strangely off balance. In his world, problems were solved with money, influence, or both. But this woman, this nurse who had literally given her blood to save his son, operated on a different frequency entirely. She's one of our best, Dr. Martinez commented, reminding Daniel that he wasn't alone in the office. Been here 6 years. Works pediatrics usually, but helps in emergency when needed. The kids adore her. Daniel nodded absently, his mind already working on a new problem. For the first time since Rebecca's death, he felt genuinely curious about another person. Nurse Carter's rejection of his dinner invitation hadn't felt like the false modesty he often encountered in business. It had felt principled, real. His phone buzzed, probably his assistant wondering about the board meeting he was missing. For once, Daniel let it ring. Instead, he asked Dr. Martinez about visiting hours in pediatrics. If Nurse Carter wouldn't accept his gratitude directly, perhaps he needed to understand her world better first. As he walked toward Ethan's room, Daniel realized he didn't even know her first name. It was a detail his assistant could easily find out. But somehow, that felt wrong. If he was going to learn anything about Emily Carter, It should be the way she seemed to do everything, honestly and directly. The smell of hospital antiseptic followed him down the corridor, but for the first time he noticed other things too. Children's artwork on the walls, the soft music playing at the nurses' station, the gentle way the staff spoke to worried parents. This was her world, as different from his corporate offices as Earth was from sky. Ethan was asleep when Daniel entered his room, the stuffed T-Rex clutched tightly in his arms. And there, on the bedside table, was a new addition, a small notebook with dinosaur stickers on the cover and a note in neat handwriting. For your own adventures. Nurse C. Daniel picked up the notebook, something tight releasing in his chest. Money couldn't buy this kind of thoughtfulness. And for the first time in 3 years, he wondered if perhaps he'd been measuring value all wrong. Emily's apartment felt especially quiet after her 12-hour shift. The small 2-bedroom space she shared with her mother was bathed in pre-dawn light, the kind that made everything look slightly unreal. She dropped her keys in the ceramic bowl by the door, a Mother's Day gift from years ago, when things were different. "Mom?" she called softly, knowing her mother would be awake. Catherine Carter's illness had destroyed her sleep patterns months ago. "In the kitchen, honey." The response was followed by the familiar sound of pills rattling in bottles. Emily found her mother sorting through her morning medications, her once steady hands now shaking slightly. Catherine's gray-streaked hair was neatly combed, but her pale blue robe had a coffee stain she hadn't noticed. These small details, the things her mother used to be obsessive about, were like paper cuts to Emily's heart. "I can help with those," Emily offered, already moving toward the counter. "I'm not completely helpless yet," Catherine snapped, then immediately softened. "I'm sorry, sweetheart, bad night. Tell me about your shift instead." Emily filled the electric kettle for tea, buying time. How could she explain the last 24 hours? The little boy with rare blood, his devastatingly attractive father, the way her simple act of donation had somehow complicated everything. "I had an interesting case," she began, selecting her words carefully. "A 5-year-old boy was in a car accident. He needed a blood transfusion, and I was a match." Catherine's hand stilled on her pill organizer. "You donated blood? During your shift?" "It was an emergency, Mom. He needed AB negative and of course you didn't think about how that might affect your ability to care for me." The words held both pride and accusation. "What if you'd gotten dizzy? What if something had happened?" "Mom, I'm fine. I took the required rest period and—" The kettle whistled, cutting through their conversation like a warning bell. Emily busied herself making tea, adding honey to her mother's cup just the way she liked it. When she turned back, Catherine's expression had softened. "Tell me about the little boy," her mother said, accepting the peace offering of hot tea. "His name is Ethan. He loves dinosaurs and has the most incredible blue eyes." Emily found herself smiling as she described him. "He's recovering well, actually. Should be discharged in a few days." "And the parents?" Emily's hand tightened on her mug. "Just his father. The mother passed away a few years ago." "Ah." Catherine's expression turned knowing. "And is this father grateful for your heroic donation?" "Mom, it wasn't heroic. It was just right." Emily sipped her tea, trying to ignore the way her mother was studying her. "Anyway, I should get some sleep before my next shift." But sleep proved elusive. Every time Emily closed her eyes, she saw Daniel Miller's face. Not the polished CEO version, but the worried father who'd looked at her like she was something precious and rare. His dinner invitation replayed in her mind, along with her firm rejection. It had been the professional thing to do, the proper thing. So why did it feel like a mistake? Her phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. For a moment, her heart jumped. But it was just Regina, asking if she could cover an extra shift next week. Emily typed back a quick agreement, ignoring the voice in her head that sounded suspiciously like her mother, warning her about taking on too much. Sleep finally came, but it felt like minutes later when her alarm went off. The October sun was high in the sky now, turning her simple room golden. Emily went through her routine on autopilot. Shower, fresh scrubs, hair in a bun, minimal makeup. Professional, detached, safe. The pediatric ward was busy when she arrived. 3 new admissions overnight, 2 discharges pending, and, her heart definitely didn't skip, Ethan Miller was being moved from ICU to regular pediatric care. "Nurse Carter," his voice, stronger now, called out as she passed his new room. "Look what Dad brought me." Emily paused in the doorway. Ethan was sitting up in bed, surrounded by what looked like every dinosaur-related item the hospital gift shop carried. And there, in an armchair that seemed too small for his frame, was Daniel Miller. He stood when he saw her, and Emily noticed he'd traded his suit for dark jeans and a gray cashmere sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The casual look suited him, making him seem more approachable, more real. "Nurse Carter," he said, his voice warm. "What a pleasant surprise." "Mr. Miller." She kept her tone professional, turning her attention to Ethan. "I see someone's feeling better today." "Dad got me everything." Ethan beamed, holding up a new stuffed stegosaurus. "And he said you're the reason I'm better. He said you gave me your blood like a superhero." Emily felt her cheeks warm. "Well, I don't know about superhero, just doing my job." "But Dad said—" "Ethan," Daniel interrupted gently, "why don't you show Nurse Carter your new dinosaur book? The one with the 3D pictures?" While Ethan eagerly reached for the book, Daniel moved closer to Emily. "I hope we didn't overstep with all this," he said quietly. "He was asking for you this morning, and when I mentioned what you did—" "It's fine," Emily assured him, though her pulse quickened at his proximity. "I'm glad he's feeling better, though you really didn't need to buy out the entire gift shop." "Force of habit," Daniel admitted, running a hand through his hair, a surprisingly human gesture for someone so polished. "When I don't know what to do, I tend to overcompensate." Their eyes met, and for a moment Emily forgot about professional distance. There was something disarming about him in this setting, away from the intensity of the emergency room. Here, he was just a father who loved his son, trying his best to make things better. "Nurse Carter," Ethan's voice broke the moment. "Can you read with me? Please?" "I have rounds to do, sweetheart," she started, but Daniel cut in. "I'm sure Nurse Carter is very busy, son. We shouldn't—" "I can spare 10 minutes, Emily found herself saying. The smile that lit up Ethan's face made any breach of protocol worth it. She settled into the chair beside his bed, aware of Daniel watching them as Ethan proudly showed her each page of his new book. His small hand found hers naturally, trustingly, as he pointed out his favorite dinosaurs. "This one's like my T-Rex," he explained, then looked up at her seriously. "Dad said you got me a notebook too, for adventures." "I did," Emily smiled. "Have you written any adventures yet?" "Not yet, maybe." He glanced at his father, then back to her. "Maybe you could help me." Before Emily could respond, a new voice came from the doorway. "Well, isn't this cozy?" The woman standing there was elegant in a way that made Emily immediately conscious of her practical scrubs and simple bun. Her perfectly styled silver hair and designer outfit screamed old money, but it was her eyes, the same striking blue-gray as Daniel's, that made Emily's stomach drop. "Mother?" Daniel said, his voice tight. "I didn't expect you until this evening." Clearly, the woman's gaze swept over Emily like a cold wind. "I decided to check on my grandson a bit earlier. I didn't realize he had additional care." Emily stood, professional mask firmly in place. "I was just finishing my rounds, actually. Ethan, we'll continue this later, okay?" "But the dinosaurs," Ethan protested. "Later, sweetheart." Emily nodded politely to Daniel and his mother. "Mr. Miller." "Ma'am." She felt their eyes on her as she left. Ethan's disappointed, Daniel's apologetic, and his mother's calculating. In her pocket, her small notebook seemed to weigh a ton, today's entry still unwritten. Sometimes the bravest thing is knowing when to step back. But as she walked away, Emily wondered if brave was really the right word for what she was doing. Daniel watched his mother's perfectly manicured fingers tap against her designer handbag, a gesture he'd learned to recognize as prelude to conflict. The private hospital suite felt suddenly smaller, despite its generous proportions. Ethan had finally fallen asleep, his new dinosaur collection arranged protectively around him. "A nurse, Daniel? Really?" Margot Miller's voice was pitched low, but sharp enough to cut glass. "I thought we were past this phase of inappropriate attachments." "There's nothing inappropriate about Nurse Carter's care for Ethan," Daniel replied, keeping his own voice steady. "She saved his life." "Yes, and we can certainly send a generous donation to the hospital's nursing fund." Margot waved her hand, dismissively. "But this personal involvement? I saw how you were looking at her." Daniel felt his jaw tighten. At 37, he was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar technology company, yet his mother still had the ability to make him feel like a teenager defending his choices. "Mother, with all due respect, my personal life is a reflection of this family's standing," she cut in. "Need I remind you of the Miller Foundation's annual charity gala next month? The board members are already questioning your focus since Rebecca's passing. If you start parading around with a nurse, enough." Daniel's voice carried the same authority he used in boardrooms. "Nurse Carter has shown more genuine care for Ethan in 3 days than your society friends have in 3 years." The suite's door opened before Margot could respond. A young nurse, not Emily, entered to check Ethan's vitals. Daniel watched his mother transform instantly, her sharp edges softening into the perfect grandmother persona she showed the world. "I should head to the office," Daniel said, gathering his laptop. "The Tokyo merger won't wait." "Of course, darling. I'll stay with Ethan." Margot's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Don't worry about anything here." That, of course, made Daniel worry more. The hospital corridor was quieter now, afternoon sunlight streaming through large windows. He paused at the pediatric nurse's station, hoping to catch a glimpse of Emily, but she wasn't there. Instead, he found himself studying the children's artwork decorating the walls, wondering if any of it was from her patients. His phone buzzed, another crisis demanding attention, but before he could leave, a small voice called out, "Mr. Miller?" He turned to find a young girl in a wheelchair, maybe 7 or 8, her dark curls wild around her face. She wore hospital pajamas decorated with unicorns. "Charlotte," she supplied helpfully. "Nurse Carter reads to me sometimes. Is she helping your son now?" Daniel knelt to her level, struck by the child's direct gaze. "Not right now. Do you know where she is?" Charlotte's face lit up with conspiratorial joy. "She's probably in the secret garden. That's where she goes to write in her special notebook when she's sad." "Secret garden?" "The little courtyard behind the cafeteria. But don't tell her I told you." Charlotte wheeled herself around with surprising skill. "She says everyone needs a quiet place sometimes." Daniel found himself heading toward the cafeteria before he could question the wisdom of following a child's directions. The secret garden turned out to be a small enclosed courtyard with a few benches and carefully maintained planters. And there, just as Charlotte had said, was Emily. She sat on a bench, her notebook open on her lap, pen moving across the page. The afternoon light caught the hints of gold in her hair, and Daniel realized she'd let it down from its usual practical boon. It fell past her shoulders in gentle waves, making her look younger, more vulnerable. He should leave. He had meetings, calls, an entire empire demanding his attention. Instead, he cleared his throat softly. Emily looked up, surprise flickering across her face before she could hide it. "Mr. Miller, is everything all right with Ethan?" "He's sleeping." Daniel gestured to the bench. "May I?" She hesitated, then nodded, closing her notebook. He noticed she was still in her scrubs, though her shift must have ended hours ago. "I wanted to apologize for my mother's behavior," he said, sitting beside her but maintaining a respectful distance. "She can be protective. You don't need to apologize." Emily's voice was soft but firm. She's not wrong about maintaining professional boundaries. Is that what you're doing out here? Maintaining boundaries? The question hung between them, more intimate than he'd intended. Emily's fingers traced the worn cover of her notebook. I come here to remember why I became a nurse, she finally said. Sometimes, between all the charts and protocols and politics, it's easy to forget. And why did you become a nurse? She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Because sometimes people need more than medicine to heal. They need someone to see them, really see them, when they're at their most vulnerable. The words hit him with unexpected force. When was the last time someone had really seen him? Not as CEO Daniel Miller, or grieving widower Daniel Miller, but just him. What do you write in that notebook? He asked, nodding toward the worn volume in her lap. A small smile touched her lips. The things children say when they're being braver than any adult I know. The moments that remind me why all the hard parts are worth it. She paused, then added softly, Ethan's on page 43. May I? He held out his hand, surprising himself with the request. Emily seemed to debate internally before carefully opening the notebook to a specific page. There, in her neat handwriting, was an entry from the day of the accident. Sometimes, the smallest warriors have the biggest hearts. Ethan M., age 5, who asked if the driver who hit his car was okay while getting his own blood transfusion. Daniel's throat tightened. He hadn't known that. Hadn't known his son's first thought had been for others, even in his own pain. He's an extraordinary child, Emily said quietly. He gets that from his mother, Daniel replied automatically, then felt the familiar weight of grief press against his chest. Tell me about her? The question was gentle, free of the usual pity he encountered when Rebecca was mentioned, and somehow, in that quiet courtyard with the late afternoon sun painting everything in gold, Daniel found himself talking about Rebecca, for the first time in years, about her passion for marine biology, her terrible cooking, the way she used to sing off-key to Ethan every night. Emily just listened, her presence somehow making it easier to remember the joy instead of just the loss. She would have liked you, he concluded, surprised to find the words were true. Emily's phone buzzed before she could respond. Her face changed as she read the message, a shadow crossing her features. Everything okay? He asked. Just my mother, she said, standing quickly. I should go. I should go. Daniel stood too, suddenly aware of how close they were. Emily. This was inappropriate, she cut in, but her voice was regretful rather than harsh. Your mother was right. There are boundaries for a reason. And if I don't want boundaries? The words escaped before he could censor them. Emily's eyes met his, and for a moment he saw everything she wasn't saying. Then she took a step back, professional mask sliding back into place. Goodbye, Mr. Miller. Please give Ethan my best. He watched her walk away, her hair catching the last rays of sunlight. His phone was buzzing again, probably his assistant, reminding him about the board meeting he was now definitely late for. But all he could think about was page 43 of a worn notebook, and the way Emily Carter seemed to see straight through every wall he'd built around his heart. In his pocket, his fingers brushed against something. The dinosaur sticker Ethan had given him earlier, insisting it would make boring work better. His son's wisdom, delivered with chocolate pudding still on his chin. Daniel Miller had built his career on calculated risks and strategic decisions. But standing in Emily Carter's secret garden, he realized some risks weren't calculated at all. Some were just worth taking. The emergency room's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows as Emily rushed through the doors, her heart pounding. The text from her neighbor had been brief but terrifying. Your mom fell, already called ambulance, at Mercy General now. She found her mother in examination room 3, looking small and fragile on the hospital bed. Dr. Lawrence, a colleague she'd worked with countless times, was reviewing Catherine's charts. Emily, he greeted her, his expression carefully neutral. Your mother took a fall while trying to water the plants on the balcony. Minor concussion, bruised ribs, and— "I'm fine," Catherine interrupted, her voice weaker than usual. "Just lost my balance for a moment. These doctors are making far too much fuss." Emily's trained eye caught the subtle tremors in her mother's hands, the slight slurring of words that hadn't been there yesterday. The progression was getting worse, faster than they'd anticipated. "We'll need to run some additional tests," Dr. Lawrence continued. "Given her condition—" "I'm right here," Catherine snapped. "Stop talking about me like I'm not in the room. Emily, tell them I want to go home." The familiar weight of responsibility settled on Emily's shoulders. "Mom, we need to let them run the tests. Please." Catherine's face crumpled. "But who's going to water your father's orchids?" Emily's chest tightened. Her father had been gone for 5 years, and there hadn't been orchids in their apartment for just as long. The confusion in her mother's eyes was new, frightening. "I'll take care of everything," Emily promised, her voice steady despite the trembling in her heart. "Just rest now." 3 hours and countless tests later, Emily stood in the hospital corridor, reviewing her mother's updated charts. The disease was accelerating, eating away at Catherine's memories and motor functions faster than the specialists had predicted. They wanted to keep her for observation, maybe longer. "Nurse Carter?" The small voice made her turn. Ethan Miller stood in the hallway in airplane-printed pajamas, his faithful T-Rex tucked under one arm. A night nurse hovered nearby, looking apologetic. "I'm sorry," the nurse said quickly. "He insisted on finding you when he heard you were in the building." "I couldn't sleep," Ethan explained, his blue eyes serious. "Dad's on a video call with Tokyo, and grandmother keeps trying to make me drink weird tea." He wrinkled his nose. "Can you read me a story? Please?" Emily glanced at her mother's room, torn between responsibilities, but something in Ethan's hopeful expression made the decision for her. "One short story," she agreed, taking his small hand. "Let's get you back to bed." They walked together to the pediatric ward, Ethan chattering about his day. His recovery was remarkable. In 2 days, he'd gone from critical condition to nearly his normal energy level. Children's resilience never ceased to amaze her. "Who were you visiting?" he asked as they reached his room. "In the other part of the hospital?" Emily helped him climb back into bed. "My mother. She's not feeling well." "Like me?" His face showed genuine concern. "Different from you, but yes, she's sick." "Is that why you look sad?" Ethan pulled his dinosaur book from under his pillow. "When I'm sad, stories help. Maybe they'll help you too." Emily felt tears prick at her eyes. "Maybe they will, sweetheart." She had just opened the book when a deep voice came from the doorway. "I leave for one conference call, and you go wandering the halls?" Daniel Miller stood there, his tie loosened and jacket discarded, looking somehow both exhausted and impossibly handsome. His mock stern expression softened when he saw Emily. "Nurse Carter, I didn't expect— I thought your shift ended hours ago." "It did," she said quietly. "I'm here for personal reasons." Something in her tone made his brow furrow, with concern. Before he could ask, another figure appeared behind him, Margot Miller, elegant even at this late hour. "Daniel, the car is waiting to take us to the hotel." Her eyes narrowed at the scene before her. "Though I see you're otherwise occupied again." "Actually," Emily stood quickly. "I was just leaving. Ethan needs his rest." "No," Ethan protested. "You promised a story." "I can read to you, darling," Margot offered, but Ethan shook his head. "Want Nurse Carter, she does the voices right." Daniel stepped fully into the room. "Mother, why don't you go ahead to the hotel? I'll stay with Ethan tonight." Margot's lips thinned, but she nodded stiffly. "Of course, though perhaps we should discuss appropriate professional boundaries tomorrow." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Emily moved toward the door, but Ethan's small voice stopped her. "Is your mom going to be okay?" The simple question, asked with such innocent concern, broke something inside her. Emily felt tears threatening again and turned away quickly. "Ethan," Daniel said softly, "why don't you pick out which story you want? Give us a minute." He guided Emily into the hallway with a gentle hand on her elbow. Away from Ethan's eyes, she allowed herself to tremble slightly. "What's wrong?" Daniel's voice was low, concerned. "Can I help?" Emily shook her head, trying to rebuild her professional walls. "It's nothing, just a long day." "Emily." The way he said her name, soft, intimate, made her look up at him. "Please." Maybe it was exhaustion, or stress, or the genuine worry in his blue-gray eyes, but Emily found herself talking. About her mother's fall, the progression of the disease, the mounting medical bills she could barely manage on a nurse's salary. "I'm sorry," she finished, wiping her eyes. "I shouldn't be dumping this on you." "Why not?" His hand was still on, her elbow warm and steadying. "You've been carrying everyone else's burdens. Let someone carry yours for a moment." The offer was so tempting, to lean on someone else to share the weight she'd been bearing alone. But, "Your mother's right," Emily said, stepping back. "There are boundaries. That's not what this is about." Daniel's voice was firm. "This is about you needing support and me wanting to give it. Not as a patient's father, not as a CEO, but as someone who—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "As someone who what?" "As someone who hasn't been able to stop thinking about you since you saved my son's life." The confession hung between them, heavy with possibility and complications. From inside the room, they heard Ethan calling. "I should go," Emily whispered, though everything in her wanted to stay. "My mother—" "Let me help," Daniel pressed. "I have connections at the best care facilities, specialists who—" "No." Emily's pride stiffened her spine. "Thank you, but no. I can handle this." She turned to leave, but his voice followed her. "Emily? When you're ready to stop handling everything alone, I'll be here." The words echoed in her mind as she walked back to her mother's room, where monitors beeped steadily and the future loomed uncertain. In her pocket, her notebook felt heavy. Today's entry was still unwritten. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting alone, it's letting someone fight beside you. But Emily Carter had learned early that depending on others was a luxury she couldn't afford. No matter how tempting the offer, or how sincere those blue-gray eyes had been, Daniel stared at the email from his board of directors, the words blurring on his phone's screen. The Tokyo merger was demanding his immediate attention in Atlanta, but the thought of leaving Ethan, even though he was nearly recovered, made his stomach knot. "The nurse can't be his mother, Daniel." His own mother's words from their morning argument echoed in his head. "He's getting too attached. We all are." The pediatric ward's morning bustle filtered through Ethan's open door. His son was finally sleeping peacefully, the morning sun casting warm light across his face. 3 days had passed since Emily's mother was admitted, and Daniel hadn't seen her since that night in the hallway. But he'd heard the whispers among the hospital staff. Catherine Carter's condition was deteriorating rapidly. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Regina, one of the regular nurses, stood in the doorway. "Mr. Miller, Dr. Martinez would like to discuss Ethan's discharge plans." Daniel nodded, casting one last look at his sleeping son before following Regina. As they passed the nurse's station, he caught sight of Emily for the first time in days. She was reviewing charts. Her hair twisted in its usual practical bun, dark circles visible under her eyes despite her makeup. She looked up as they passed, their eyes meeting briefly before she looked away. Dr. Martinez's office was bright with morning light. The doctor smiled as Daniel entered, gesturing to a chair. "Good news, Mr. Miller. Ethan's recovery has exceeded our expectations. I think we can discharge him tomorrow morning." Relief flooded through Daniel, quickly followed by an unexpected pang. Leaving meant no more legitimate reasons to see Emily. "That's wonderful," he managed. "Though the timing is complicated. I'm needed in Atlanta for an emergency board meeting." "Ah, yes." Dr. Martinez's expression grew careful. "Your mother, Mentioned she'd be handling Ethan's discharge and aftercare. Something in the doctor's tone made Daniel pause. Is there a concern? Not officially. Dr. Martinez leaned forward slightly. But off the record? Ethan has formed a strong attachment to our staff, particularly Nurse Carter. An abrupt separation might be difficult for him. Daniel's jaw tightened. My mother seems to think that attachment is the problem. With all due respect to Mrs. Miller, in my experience, children's instincts about who they can trust are rarely wrong. The doctor's words were carefully chosen. Nurse Carter has a gift for helping our young patients through transitions. Perhaps she could... A commotion in the hallway cut him off. Raised voices, running feet, and then Emily's voice, sharp with panic. Code Blue, room 415. Daniel was moving before he could think, following the sound of her voice. Room 415. Catherine Carter's room. He reached the doorway just as the crash team rushed past him. Emily stood beside her mother's bed, performing chest compressions with mechanical precision. Her face was a mask of professional focus, but Daniel saw the terror in her eyes. Multiple organ failure, someone called out. BP dropping. Mom? Emily's voice cracked slightly. Mom, please. Nurse Carter. Dr. Lawrence's voice was gentle but firm. You need to step back. Let us work. She shook her head, still performing compressions. I can't. Emily. Daniel stepped forward, acting on instinct. Let them help her. Something in his voice reached her. Emily's hands stilled, and Daniel gently pulled her away from the bed. She didn't resist when he led her into the hallway, though her entire body was trembling. I can't lose her, she whispered. I can't. Shh. Daniel pulled her close, professional boundaries forgotten. Just breathe. They stood there, Emily's face pressed against his chest, his arms holding, her steady as the medical team worked to save her mother. Daniel could feel her heart racing, could smell the subtle floral scent of her shampoo. He murmured soft words of comfort, knowing they were inadequate but unable to stay silent. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, Dr. Lawrence emerged, his face grave. Emily. He waited until she turned to face him, though she didn't step out of Daniel's embrace. We've stabilized her, but it's time to discuss options. The clinical terminology that followed, palliative care, comfort measures, DNR orders, seemed to physically pain Emily. Daniel held her tighter, feeling each flinch as the doctor outlined Catherine's prognosis. I need to make some calls, she said when Dr. Lawrence finished. The care facility costs already taken care of. The new voice made them all turn. Margot Miller stood in the hallway, elegant as always in a designer suit. Mrs. Miller. Emily straightened, pulling away from Daniel. I've made arrangements at Riverside Care Center, Margot continued, her voice surprisingly gentle. The best long-term care facility in Louisiana. They're expecting Catherine this afternoon. Emily's face went pale. I can't accept that. The cost is handled through the Miller Foundation's healthcare initiative. Margot's eyes met Daniel's, something unreadable in their depths. Consider it repayment for saving my grandson's life. Mother. Daniel's voice held warning, but Margot raised a hand. For once, Daniel, let me do this my way. She turned back to Emily. You can't care for her alone anymore, dear. Let us help. Emily swayed slightly and Daniel steadied her with a hand at her waist. Why? She asked Margot. Because I was wrong about you. Margot's admission seemed to cost her, and because sometimes pride must bow to necessity. The moment was interrupted by a small voice. Nurse Carter? Ethan stood in the hallway in his dinosaur pajamas, looking confused and worried. Regina said you were sad. Is your mom okay? Emily wiped her eyes quickly, trying to smile. No, sweetheart, she's not okay. Ethan walked over and took her hand. When I'm sick, you make things better. Maybe we can make your mom better together. The simple offer broke through Emily's last defenses. A sob escaped her as she knelt to hug Ethan. Over his shoulder, her eyes met Daniel's, and in them he saw everything she couldn't say: gratitude, fear, and something deeper that made his heart race. "I need to check on my mother," she said, finally standing. "And you, young man, need to rest if you're going home tomorrow. Will you come say goodbye?" Ethan's question was innocent, but it landed like a punch to Daniel's gut. Emily's professional mask slipped back into place. "Of course, I'll come see you before my shift ends." She disappeared into her mother's room, leaving Daniel with his son and his mother. Ethan looked between them, his young face serious. "Dad? Can Nurse Carter come visit us in Atlanta? She makes everything better." Margot surprised them both by kneeling to Ethan's level. "Sometimes, darling, the people who make everything better need someone to make things better for them first." Daniel watched his mother lead Ethan back to his room, her words echoing in his mind. He looked at Catherine Carter's room, where Emily was surely fighting another battle with her pride and independence. The Tokyo merger could wait. Some things were more important than business deals and board meetings. Some people were worth fighting for, even if they weren't ready to admit they needed the help. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with another urgent email. Daniel ignored it, his mind already forming plans. Emily Carter had saved his son's life, and in doing so had awakened something in him he'd thought died with Rebecca. Now it was his turn to save her, if only she'd let him. The Riverside Care Center looked more like a luxury resort than a medical facility. Emily stood in her mother's new private suite, taking in the garden view, the tasteful furnishings, and the state-of-the-art medical equipment that had been seamlessly integrated into the space. Everything screamed expensive and impossible on a nurse's salary. "The physical therapist will be here at 10, the facility director explained, reviewing Catherine's care plan, and Dr. Richardson, our neurological specialist, has already reviewed her case." Emily nodded, her throat tight. Her mother was sleeping peacefully for the first time in days, the premium medications already making a difference. The guilt of accepting Margot Miller's help warred with the relief of seeing her mother properly cared for. "There's something else." The director handed her an envelope. "Mrs. Miller arranged for a private nurse to cover your mother's care during your shifts at the hospital. The schedule is inside." Emily's pride reared its head. You can't be in two places at once," a familiar voice interrupted. Daniel stood in the doorway, his presence filling the room. "And you can't help others if you're exhausted yourself." The facility director excused herself, leaving Emily alone with Daniel and her sleeping mother. He looked different today, more casual in dark jeans and a gray sweater, as if he was trying to downplay his usual CEO presence. "Why are you here?" Emily asked softly, conscious of her mother's rest. "Board meeting got postponed." He moved closer, studying Catherine's peaceful face. "And I wanted to make sure you were okay." "I'm fine." The response was automatic. "Are you?" His eyes met hers, too perceptive. "Because accepting help doesn't make you weak, Emily. Sometimes it makes you stronger." She turned to the window, blinking back tears. "Your mother didn't have to do this." "No, she didn't." Daniel's reflection appeared beside hers in the glass. "But maybe she saw what I've seen. Someone who gives everything to others and keeps nothing for herself." Emily's hand tightened on the envelope. "I should get to the hospital. Ethan's discharge is this afternoon." Daniel's voice softened. "He's been asking for you." The thought of saying goodbye to Ethan made her chest ache. She'd grown too, attached, broken too many professional boundaries. But how could she not when his bright spirit had brought such light to her increasingly complicated life? "I'll stop by before he leaves," she promised. "Emily." Daniel touched her arm gently, turning her to face him. "This doesn't have to be goodbye." The warmth of his hand seemed to spread through her entire body. "Mr. Miller." "Daniel," he corrected. "Please, after everything." "Daniel." His name felt intimate on her tongue. "You're returning to Atlanta. Ethan needs stability, routine, and I have responsibilities here." What about what you need? The question caught her off guard. When was the last time anyone had asked her that? A soft sound from the bed saved her from answering. Catherine was stirring, her eyes fluttering open with more clarity than Emily had seen in days. Mom. Emily moved to her side, taking her hand. How are you feeling? Catherine's gaze moved between Emily and Daniel, a hint of her old sharpness, returning. Better, though I seem to have acquired some very expensive care. Mrs. Carter, Daniel stepped forward. I hope you're finding everything comfortable. Quite. Catherine's voice was weak but determined. Though I wonder what the cost is for my daughter. Mom, please. No, Emily. Catherine squeezed her hand. I've watched you carry every burden alone since your father died. Maybe it's time to let someone else help shoulder the weight. Emily felt tears threatening again. I can handle it. Of course you can. Her mother's smile was sad. You're my strongest girl. But should you have to? A knock at the door interrupted the moment. A nurse entered with Catherine's morning medications, and Emily used the opportunity to compose herself. I should get to work, she said, gathering her bag. I'll be back this evening. Emily. Her mother's voice stopped her. Promise me something? Stop writing other people's stories in that notebook of yours and start living your own. The words followed Emily down the elegant hallways of Riverside, echoing in her mind as she drove to the hospital. Her notebook sat heavy in her pocket, today's page still blank. What story would she write for herself if she dared? The pediatric ward was unusually quiet when she arrived. Ethan's room had been cleared of the dinosaur collection, the bed already stripped for the next patient. She found him in the playroom instead, sitting with his grandmother while Daniel signed discharge papers. Nurse Carter. His whole face lit up when he saw her. Look what Dad got me. He held up a leather-bound notebook similar to hers but new, with a dinosaur embossed on the cover. Now I can write adventures like you. Emily knelt beside him, touching the notebook gently. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Will you write in it first? He pushed it into her hands. Please? So I won't forget you? Ethan, Margot began, but Emily was already opening the notebook. Her hand trembled slightly as she wrote, For the bravest, boy I know who taught me that sometimes the greatest adventure is letting people into your heart. Never stop believing in dinosaurs and magic. Love, Nurse Carter. Ethan threw his arms around her neck and Emily held him close, memorizing the feel of his small body, his complete trust, his innocent love. Dad says we have to go home, he whispered against her hair. But I don't want to leave you. Hey. Emily pulled back, wiping her eyes. Remember what we talked about with your T-Rex? About how being brave means doing hard things? Ethan nodded solemnly. Well, this is one of those times. But you know what? Every time you write in this notebook, I'll be right there with you in spirit. Promise? Cross my heart. Daniel appeared in the doorway, and Emily felt the weight of his gaze. She stood, professional mask firmly in place, though her heart was breaking. The car's ready, he said softly. Ethan, say goodbye to Nurse Carter. One last hug, one last whispered, I love you. And then Ethan was walking away, clutching his notebook and his faithful T-Rex. Margot followed, but Daniel lingered. Emily, take care of him, she cut in, not trusting herself to hear whatever he was about to say. Come to Atlanta. The words rushed out like he couldn't hold them back. The children's hospital there is expanding their pediatric unit. They need experienced nurses. Ethan needs... Please don't. Emily wrapped her arms around herself. I can't. Daniel stepped closer, his voice low and intense. Can't or won't. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. A text from Riverside about her mother. Reality crashing back in. Goodbye, Mr. Miller, she said firmly, stepping back. Have a safe trip home. She walked away before he could respond, her steps quick and measured until she reached her secret garden. Only there, Surrounded by the morning light and the gentle sound of fountain water did she allow herself to cry. Her notebook fell open as she sat on the familiar bench. Through tears, she wrote, "Sometimes the hardest goodbye is the one you know you'll regret forever." But under those words, in smaller script, she added, "And sometimes goodbye is just the beginning of a different story." She just wasn't sure which story she was brave enough to choose. 3 weeks after Ethan's departure, Emily found herself standing in his old hospital room, now occupied by a young patient with pneumonia. The space held echoes of dinosaur stories and midnight conversations, of blue-gray eyes and life-changing choices. "Still haunting this room, huh?" Regina's voice startled her from her thoughts. Her fellow nurse leaned against the doorframe, holding out a cup of coffee. "You know, they're doing well in Atlanta. Little man's back to full strength." Emily accepted the coffee, avoiding Regina's knowing look. "You've been keeping tabs?" "Unlike you, I'm not too proud to check their social media." Regina pulled out her phone, showing Emily a recent photo of Ethan at what appeared to be a science museum, beaming beside a massive dinosaur skeleton. He was clutching his notebook, the one she'd written in. "He looks happy," Emily said softly, ignoring the ache in her chest. "And the father?" Regina scrolled to another photo. Daniel at some tech conference, looking polished in a dark aisle. The gossip blogs are buzzing about his mysterious withdrawal from social events. Apparently he's turned down every charity gala invitation since returning to Atlanta. Emily handed the phone back. "That's none of my business." "Really?" "Because the Atlanta Children's Hospital called again. 3rd time this week. They're very interested in an experienced pediatric nurse with your qualifications." Regina. "And don't tell me it's because of your mother," Regina cut in. "Catherine's getting better care at Riverside than most 5-star hotels provide. The Miller Foundation made sure of that." Emily's pager buzzed before she could respond. A call. From Riverside. Her heart jumped, but the message was routine. Her mother was having a good day, asking if Emily would join her for dinner. "Go," Regina said, taking the coffee cup back. "But Emily, at some point you have to stop running from happiness just because you're afraid it might not last." The drive to Riverside gave Emily too much time to think. The past 3 weeks had been a blur of work and visits to her mother, of trying not to check her phone for messages that weren't coming, of pretending she didn't miss a pair of bright blue eyes and dinosaur stories. The care facility's elegant entrance still made her feel out of place despite her daily visits. But today something was different. Her mother was waiting in the private garden, dressed in actual clothes instead of a robe, her hair styled for the first time in months. "Mom?" Emily hurried over. "Should you be out here?" "Oh, hush." Catherine waved off her concern. "Dr. Richardson says the fresh air is good for me. And we're celebrating." "Celebrating what?" "My test results." Catherine's eyes were clearer than they'd been in weeks. "The new medication protocol is working. The progression has slowed significantly." Emily sat heavily in the garden chair. "What?" "Don't look so shocked, dear. Apparently having access to world-class neurologists and experimental treatments makes a difference." Her mother's expression turned shrewd. "Thanks to the Miller's generosity." "Mom, please." "No, you're going to listen." Catherine reached for her daughter's hand. "I've watched you put your life on hold for me, making yourself smaller to fit into the role of caretaker. But I'm stable now, Emily. I'm being cared for. It's time for you to live." Emily's throat tightened. "I am living." "Are you?" "Because that little boy's father didn't just offer you a job in Atlanta. He offered you a chance at happiness." "How did you?" "The walls here aren't that thick," dear Catherine smiled. "And Daniel Miller isn't exactly subtle when he calls to check on my progress twice a week." Emily's heart stuttered. "He calls?" "Mm-hmm. Very concerned about my care, though somehow he always manages to ask about you too." Catherine squeezed her hand. "He's not the only one who calls, you know. That sweet boy of his sends me pictures of his adventures. Says he's saving the best ones for when his favorite nurse visits." Tears burned behind Emily's eyes. It's not that simple. Love never is. Catherine's voice softened, but that doesn't mean it's not worth it. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the gentle fountain and distant bird calls. Emily's notebook felt heavy in her pocket. She'd filled pages with unspoken words these past weeks, with all the things she wished she had the courage to say. I'm scared, she finally admitted, barely a whisper. Of what, sweetheart? Of wanting something for myself. Of letting myself need someone. Of... Emily wiped her eyes. Of loving them and losing them. Like we lost your father? Catherine's question was gentle but direct. Emily, your father lived fully and loved deeply until his last day. Would you erase that love just because it ended? Before Emily could respond, her phone chimed with a text. Her hands shook as she read it. Ethan asked for you today. Said his new adventure notebook needed your magic touch. I miss your magic too. Attached was a photo of Ethan's notebook, open to a crayon drawing of what appeared to be 3 figures. A tall one in a suit, a small one with a dinosaur, and a figure in the middle wearing what looked like nurses' scrubs. Oh, my darling girl. Catherine touched her daughter's tear-stained cheek. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit that our heart already made the choice our head is too scared to make. Emily's pager buzzed again, the hospital this time. A new admission in pediatrics needed her attention. Reality calling. Go, her mother said. Do what you do best. But Emily, tomorrow morning I want you to call Atlanta Children's Hospital. Back. Not for Daniel Miller, not for Ethan, but for yourself. Because you deserve a chance at your own happiness. Standing to leave, Emily hugged her mother tightly, inhaling the familiar scent of her perfume. Another sign of her improving health. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise, dear. You've just been too busy taking care of everyone else to notice. In her car, Emily pulled out her notebook, adding today's entry. Sometimes the strongest foundations are built on the courage to be vulnerable, and sometimes love isn't about being fearless. It's about being brave enough to love despite the fear. Her phone sat heavy in her pocket, Daniel's text unanswered. But for the first time in weeks, the weight felt like possibility, rather than burden. Regina's words from earlier echoed in her mind. Stop running from happiness just because you're afraid it might not last. Maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to write a new story. Not in her notebook, but in her life. The hospital waited, full of children who needed her care. But tonight, for the first time, Emily let herself imagine a different hospital in a different city, where a little boy with a dinosaur notebook and his blue-eyed father might be waiting too. The choice wasn't simple. But then again, the best stories never were. The Atlanta Children's Hospital job offer sat unopened in Emily's email, a digital testament to her indecision. Outside her apartment window, New Orleans sparkled in the evening light, the city she'd always called home suddenly feeling both familiar and foreign. Her phone lit up with another text from Regina. Miller Foundation Annual Gala tomorrow night. In Atlanta. Rumor has it a certain CEO is skipping it. Third major event he's missed. Just saying. Emily set the phone down, trying to ignore the way her heart jumped at any mention of Daniel. Her apartment felt emptier than usual, filled with boxes from her half-hearted attempt at organizing. She'd told herself she was just cleaning, but deep down she knew she was preparing for a decision she'd already made. A knock at her door startled her. Opening it revealed her mother, accompanied by her private nurse from Riverside. Mom, what are you doing here? Catherine entered with more strength than Emily had seen in months, her eyes bright with purpose. Staging an intervention. What? Sit down, dear. Catherine settled onto the couch while her nurse discreetly retreated. We need to talk about why you're really still in New Orleans. Emily remained standing, arms crossed. I have responsibilities here. No, you have fears here. Catherine patted the couch beside her. Fears that have become comfortable like old blankets wrapping you so tight you can barely breathe. Reluctantly, Emily sat. It's not that simple. Actually, it is? Catherine pulled something from her bag, Emily's childhood photo album. Look at this. The album fell open to a page Emily knew well. Her father teaching her to ride a bike. Her small face determined despite the scrapes on her knees. You fell 7 times that day, Catherine said softly. But you got back up 8 times. That's who you are, Emily. Not someone who hides from life, but someone who embraces it. Scrapes, bruises, and all. That was different. Was it? Catherine turned another page. Emily's nursing school graduation. You were terrified of failing, but you did it anyway. Because helping others was more important than your fear. Mom. And now, Catherine continued, pulling out her phone. There's a little boy in Atlanta who draws pictures like this. She showed Emily a new photo from Ethan, a crayon masterpiece featuring a hospital with a giant heart on it, and the words "missing you" in childish scrawl. Emily's eyes burned. He needs to move on. They both do. Do they? Or is that what you're telling yourself because it's easier than admitting you're terrified of being needed for more than just your ability to care for others? The truth of her mother's words hit like a physical blow. Emily stood, moving to the window, watching the city lights blur through her tears. What if I fail? She whispered. What if I go to Atlanta and it doesn't work out? What if I'm not what they need? What if you are? Catherine's voice was gentle. What if this is your chance at the kind of love that changes everything? Are you really willing to spend the rest of your life wondering, what if? Emily's phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from Daniel himself. Ethan asked me today why hearts can keep beating even when they're broken. I didn't have an answer. You always seem to know what to say to him, to all of us. Catherine watched her daughter read the message, noting the way her hands trembled. He hasn't given up on you. He should, Emily said, but her voice lacked conviction. Why? Because you're not perfect? Because you're scared? Because loving someone means risking loss? Catherine stood, moving to join her daughter at the window. Those aren't reasons to give up on love, Emily. They're reasons to fight for it. Emily pulled out her notebook, turning to the latest entry. Sometimes the biggest lies we tell are the ones we tell ourselves about why we can't have what we want. The Atlanta job, she said finally. They want an answer by tomorrow. I know. Catherine smiled. Dr. Richardson mentioned it during my last checkup. Apparently someone's been making quite a few calls on your behalf. Daniel? And his mother, surprisingly enough. Catherine's eyes twinkled. Margot Miller can be quite persuasive when she wants something. Seems she's decided you're exactly what her son and grandson need. Emily sank back onto the couch, overwhelmed. But you're here and your care is completely handled. Catherine sat beside her. Thanks to the Millers, I have the best care anyone could ask for, and Atlanta's not that far. There are these amazing inventions called airplanes. Despite herself, Emily laughed, then sobered. The gala's tomorrow night. Yes, it is. Catherine reached into her bag one more time, pulling out an envelope. Which is why I brought you this. Inside was a plane ticket to Atlanta, departing early tomorrow morning. Mom. Sometimes, Catherine said softly, love requires a leap of faith. Your father taught me that. Now it's my turn to teach you. Emily stared at the ticket, her heart racing. Images flashed through her mind. Ethan's bright smile, Daniel's intense gaze, the way they both looked at her like she was something precious rather than just useful. Her phone buzzed one final time. A photo from Regina. It showed the pediatric ward's bulletin board, where Ethan's latest drawing had been pinned. Below it, in Regina's handwriting, was a quote from Emily's notebook that she'd shared weeks ago. The bravest hearts are the ones that keep loving, even when love feels like the scariest choice. Well? Catherine watched her daughter's face. What's it going to be? Are you going to keep hiding behind duty and fear, or are you ready to be as brave as that little girl who got back on her bike 8 times? Emily looked around her apartment, at the half-packed boxes, the walls that had witnessed so many lonely nights. the city lights that suddenly seemed more like a comfortable prison than a home. Then she looked at the plane ticket again, and for the first time in weeks her heart and her head agreed on something. It was time to stop running. She pulled out her phone, opened the email from Atlanta Children's Hospital and clicked, accept. Mom? Emily's voice shook slightly. I think I need help packing. Catherine's smile was radiant. That's my brave girl. Outside, New Orleans continued to sparkle, but Emily's eyes were fixed on the future, on a city she'd never called home, a hospital she'd never worked in, and two hearts she'd never stopped caring for, even when she tried. Tomorrow would bring challenges, fears, and uncertainties. But for tonight there was only the certainty that some loves were worth being brave for. In her notebook she wrote one final entry. Sometimes the scariest choices lead us exactly where we were always meant to be. The ink was barely dry when she started packing. The Miller Foundation annual gala transformed Atlanta's grand botanical garden into a wonderland of lights and elegance. Emily stood at the entrance, her simple navy blue evening gown, borrowed from Regina, feeling both perfect and inadequate. Her heart thundered in her chest as she showed her invitation, courtesy of Margot Miller, who had somehow known Emily would need it. She'd spent the day settling into her hotel, trying to quiet the voice in her head that whispered she was making a mistake. The Atlanta Children's Hospital orientation wasn't until Monday, giving her this weekend to either embrace her decision or run back to New Orleans. Miss Carter? A staff member approached. Mrs. Miller asked me to escort you to the family reception area. Emily followed, her heels clicking against marble floors. The gardens were stunning, transformed by thousands of twinkling lights that reflected off the glass ceiling. But it wasn't the decor that made her breath catch. It was the sound of a child's laughter, one she'd know anywhere. Nurse Carter, Ethan's voice carried across the space, and suddenly he was running toward her, small body colliding with her legs in a fierce hug. He wore a miniature tuxedo, complete with a dinosaur-patterned bow tie. You came! He beamed up at her. Dad said you might, but Grandmother said not to get my hopes up, but I knew you'd come because I drew it in my adventure book and… Ethan. Daniel's voice, deep and familiar, made Emily's heart skip. Let her breathe, son. She looked up, and there he was. Daniel Miller in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his blue-gray eyes intense as they met hers. He looked exactly the same and completely different. Still the powerful CEO, but somehow softer around the edges, more human. You're here, he said softly, wonder in his voice. I'm here. Emily managed a smile, though her hands trembled. Your mother's invitation was persuasive. Was it now? His lips curved slightly. And the job offer from Atlanta Children's? Also persuasive. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You accepted? This morning. Emily knelt to Ethan's level, needing a moment to compose herself. I hear they have a pretty amazing pediatric ward. You're staying? Ethan's whole face lit up. In Atlanta? With us? Well, not with you exactly, but nearby, Daniel finished, his voice carrying a weight of possibility. Close enough for dinner, perhaps? Emily stood, meeting his gaze. I thought you didn't like being interrupted during dinner. I'm learning to appreciate unexpected changes to my routine. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Especially when they involve brave nurses who save more than just lives. Daniel, there you are. Margot Miller's voice cut through the moment. She approached in a designer gown, her elegance somehow both intimidating and welcoming. Emily, dear, I'm so glad you made it. Though I must say I expected you hours ago. Emily blinked. You did? Of course, the movers needed direction with your furniture placement. What? Margot's smile was satisfied. You didn't think we'd let you stay in a hotel, did you? The apartment across from Daniel's has been vacant for months. The building management was quite accommodating when the Miller Foundation expressed interest. Mother. Daniel's tone held warning, but his eyes sparkled. We talked about interference. No, darling. We talked about negative interference. Margot winked at Emily. This is the positive kind. Now, Ethan, come help grandmother greet the guests. Your father and Nurse Carter need to talk. As they walked away, Ethan turned back to wave, his small face glowing with happiness. Emily watched him go, her heart so full it hurt. I'm sorry about my mother, Daniel said quietly. She can be overwhelming? I was going to say surprisingly insightful. He turned to face her fully. She saw what I felt from the beginning, that you weren't just Ethan's nurse. You were the missing piece we didn't know we were looking for. Emily's eyes burned, with tears. I was so scared, she admitted, of wanting this, of deserving it. And now? Now I'm terrified. She laughed softly. But someone once told me that being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing anyway. Sounds like a wise person. She is. Emily smiled. My mother sends her regards, by the way. She told me to tell you that your twice-weekly calls about her care weren't exactly subtle. Daniel had the grace to look sheepish. I needed to know you were free to choose, that you weren't bound by obligation. I know. She touched his arm gently. Thank you for that, for everything. Music began to play, soft and romantic. Daniel held out his hand. Dance with me? Here? Now? Unless you're still maintaining professional boundaries? His eyes challenged and welcomed her. Emily took his hand, letting him draw her close. They swayed together under the twinkling lights, the garden's glass ceiling revealing a sky full of stars above them. I've been thinking, Daniel murmured against her hair. Dangerous pastime. Indeed. His chuckle rumbled through his chest. But I realized something. When Rebecca died, I thought I had to choose between being a CEO and being a father. I tried to be perfect at both and ended up disconnected from everything. Until you. Emily pulled back slightly to see his face. Me? You showed me that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. Real. Sometimes messy, but always true. His hand cupped her cheek. You taught Ethan that it's okay to miss his mother and still love others. You taught me that it's okay to be vulnerable, to need help, to let people in. I was just doing my job, she whispered. No. His voice was firm. You were being you. And that's exactly what we needed. What we still need if you'll have us. In the distance, Emily could see Ethan watching them, his small face hopeful. Margot stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder, her expression surprisingly soft. I don't know how to do this, Emily admitted. Be part of a family again. Love without fear. So we'll learn together. Daniel's thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. One day at a time, one adventure at a time. Speaking of adventures, Emily reached into her clutch, pulling out her notebook. Ethan's not the only one who's been writing them down. Daniel opened the notebook to the last entry, reading aloud. Sometimes home isn't a place. Sometimes it's a feeling, a choice, a leap of faith. Sometimes it's two hearts making room for a third, and love being brave enough to try. I wrote that on the plane, she said softly. When I finally knew I was flying towards something instead of running away. Emily. Daniel's voice held every emotion they'd been dancing around for weeks. May I kiss you? She nodded, and his lips met hers under the starlight. The kiss was gentle but sure, a promise and a beginning, wrapped into one perfect moment. They broke apart at the sound of small feet running toward them. Ethan crashed into their legs, wrapping his arms around them both. Does this mean you're staying forever? He asked, looking up at Emily with hope-filled eyes. Emily knelt down, straightening his dinosaur bow tie. How about we start with tomorrow? I hear there's a new exhibit at the Science Museum and I've got a whole empty apartment that needs exploring. Can we write about it in our notebooks? Absolutely. She glanced up at Daniel, who was watching them with undisguised love. I think we're going to have lots of adventures to write about. Together? Ethan held out his small hand. Emily took it, rising to stand beside Daniel, who wrapped an arm around them both. Together, she agreed. Above them, the stars continued to shine, witnesses to a new family being born from courage, choice, and love. In Emily's notebook, the next page waited blank, ready for all the adventures yet to come. Because sometimes the best stories aren't the ones we write down, but the ones we live. And this was just beginning. 1 year later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of their Atlanta penthouse as Emily finished packing Ethan's lunch. His dinosaur-shaped sandwich containers had become something of a tradition, though now, at 6 years old, he insisted on helping make them himself. Don't forget your adventure notebook, she called out, hearing his quick footsteps down the hallway. Got it. Ethan bounded into the kitchen, his school uniform slightly rumpled, his beloved T-Rex tucked under one arm. Dad said we're still going to visit Grandma Catherine this weekend, right? Emily smiled, smoothing his collar. Yes, and she's very excited about showing you the new therapy garden at Riverside. She helped design it, you know. Can I bring my notebook to show her my new stories? Of course. Emily touched the simple gold band on her left ring finger, still new enough to make her pause sometimes in wonder. She loves your stories almost as much as I do. Almost as much as what? Daniel's voice came from behind her, followed by his arms wrapping around her waist. As much as I love you, she replied, leaning back against him. The ease of saying those words still amazed her. How naturally love had grown from fear, how comfort had replaced uncertainty. Gross, Ethan declared, but his grin betrayed him. Can we go? I want to show Miss Chen my new science project before class starts. Daniel grabbed his keys, dropping a kiss on Emily's temple. I'll drop him off on my way to the office. Don't forget we're meeting Mother for lunch to finalize the plans for the pediatric wing dedication. The Miller Foundation's newest project, a state-of-the-art pediatric care center at Atlanta Children's Hospital, had been Margot's idea. In honor of the nurse who taught us all how to love better, she'd said at the groundbreaking ceremony, making Emily cry. I remember. Emily handed Ethan his lunch bag decorated with his latest dinosaur stickers. I'll bring the latest design proposals. And your notebook? Ethan asked hopefully. The special one? Emily touched the worn volume on the counter. Her original notebook, now filled to the last page with a year's worth of new adventures. Beside it sat a pristine leather-bound replacement, a wedding gift from Margot, embossed with her new initials. See him, always, she promised. After they left, Emily took a moment to appreciate the quiet. Their home was a blend of modern luxury and comfortable chaos. Daniel's refined taste mixed with Ethan's exuberant presence and her own practical touches. Photos lined the walls. Ethan's first day at his new school, Catherine's surprise birthday, party at Riverside, the intimate wedding ceremony in the botanical garden where they'd first danced. Her phone buzzed with a text from Regina back in New Orleans. Patient in room 204 asked about you today. Told her you were busy writing your, own happy ending. Send pics from the pediatric wing dedication. Emily smiled, opening her new notebook. On the first page, she'd already written, sometimes the best adventures aren't the ones we plan, but the ones that plan themselves. Sometimes love knows better than fear. Sometimes family isn't just blood. It's choice, courage, and trust, all wrapped up in daily moments of grace. The sound of small feet running back toward the apartment made her look up. Ethan burst through the door, slightly out of breath. Forgot something. He ran to her, throwing his arms around her waist in a fierce hug. Love you, Mom. The word, still new, still precious, made her heart swell. Behind him, Daniel watched from the doorway, his eyes soft with understanding. Love you too. Sweetheart, she managed, kissing the top of his head. Now go learn something amazing. Always do. He raced back out, energy boundless. Daniel crossed the room, pulling her close for a proper kiss. Happy? He asked. Though he knew the answer, Emily thought of her mother, thriving at Riverside and planning garden parties. Of Margot, who now insisted on weekly family dinners and spoiled Ethan shamelessly. Of Regina, who'd cried at the wedding and still sent daily updates from New Orleans. Of her pediatric patients here in Atlanta, who filled her days with purpose and joy. But mostly she thought of love. How it had snuck up on her in a hospital room, wrapped in dinosaur stories and second chances. How it had taught her that sometimes the bravest thing wasn't running away, but standing still long enough to let happiness catch up. More than I ever knew possible, she answered truthfully. In her notebook, there were still pages to fill. But the best stories she'd learned were the ones written in moments like these, in morning hugs and forgotten lunches, in golden rings, and chosen families, in the quiet certainty that love, when given room to grow, could heal even the most careful of hearts. And this story, it was just getting started. Daniel and Ethan offered Emily not only love, but a new definition of family. Sometimes life's greatest blessings require the greatest leaps of faith. What's the biggest leap of faith you've ever taken for love? Or what is the one you still hesitate to take? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.